Welcome to The Backstory, a podcast from the North Dakota News Cooperative that takes an in-depth look at the stories we're reporting for you. I'm Sabrina Halvorson, CEO of the North Dakota News Cooperative. Joining me is Michael Standaert, our lead reporter. The headline for this article is Mini-doc popularity mirrors growing interest in regenerative agriculture. Michael, for listeners who may not already be familiar with this topic, can you explain a bit about what regenerative agriculture is and how it's different from what we call conventional farming?
So regenerative agriculture is more concerned with improving soil biodiversity, soil quality, reducing chemical inputs, so reducing fertilizers, pesticides, and other synthetic chemicals on the soil in order to restore the natural kind of ability of that soil to grow crops and things like that. Over time, especially in the last 120 years, about 50% of the topsoil has been lost in a lot of areas of North Dakota. And this is not just North Dakota, it's across the country. For where I'm from originally in Western Illinois and Eastern Iowa, there's been a severe loss of the rich topsoil there. So it's about kind of regrowing that soil so it can keep producing for many years to come. There's been parts of the country where somebody I was speaking with mentioned in Arkansas, because of the invasive weeds there, they've had to turn to regenerative agriculture in many cases because the fertilizers, the pesticides, the chemicals, the weed killers aren't working anymore. So you can get to a point where you use things like no-till, where you're not disturbing the soil, where you're growing cover crops between other crops and improving that topsoil to where it keeps weeds away, some of these other weeds that can damage your crops. And it can take time, and people are it out in various parts of the state, and that was the focus of this story, but also this YouTube video that this organization Kiss the Ground had produced, and pretty remarkable that near 600,000 views just in the last 6 months. So there's a lot of interest.
I thought it was really interesting. As you're saying, there's a growing interest in regenerative agriculture. There's also a growing interest in these mini documentaries. And this kind of combines the two. How did they come together, I guess? The documentary and the regenerative agriculture. How did these two new trends come together?
I'm not sure how the new trends came together, but from speaking with the CEO of Kiss the Ground, he had heard from other people about these two farmers near Leonard, North Dakota, reached out to them, thought they would be for this mini documentary because they're working together. They're experimenting with all these things, and they've been lifelong friends, and they've seen a need to switch over to this more regenerative agriculture. Speaking with Tyler Zimmerman, he talked about how they've been able to reduce the inputs, these chemical inputs. In some cases, they've not been able to do it so much. In other cases, they've been able to do it more, and they hope to do that more over time. But in the cases where they have been able to do it, it's reduced costs for them. So it's been good for the profitability of their farms. It just takes a lot of experimentation and learning and constant education about what will work, and what works here in North Dakota might not necessarily work in Arkansas or elsewhere. Another one of these mini documentaries that Kiss the Ground has done was on a farmer down in New Mexico, and yeah, definitely what works there might not work in North Dakota. So it's a trial and error thing in each area, and they're all trying to learn from each other about what works in their areas and what works in general for all of them. But it can be very different from depending on where you're at.
Building on that a little bit, you spoke with experts about regenerative farming in North Dakota. What are they saying the future looks like for that?
There's growing interest in this, and a lot of it's driven by consumers. From what the experts have said, there's increased awareness of things like gut health and how the gut microbiome is so important for overall health, for mental health, and how a gut microbiome is kind of similar to a soil microbiome. If the soil microbiome is damaged, you might not get the right nutrients in the crops and the kind of biological materials that you're getting through eating the produce and things like that. It can be different, and your gut microbiome might be damaged by some of the pesticides, some of these other chemical residues that are on there. This awareness is driving consumers to want to purchase things grown regeneratively, grown with less pesticides, less chemicals. And in some cases, that's an organic farm. In other cases, it's whether it's regenerative beef or beef grown on a regenerative ranch, this sort of thing. Basically, the message was that consumers are driving this, and there could be a tipping point where, as more awareness grows, there'll be a bigger push for farmers to go regenerative, away from more conventional agriculture practices.
So looking at the other side of our podcast, what we do with every episode, we talk about the story that you wrote, but then we also talk about the processes that went into it. And so I'm curious, just as a reporter, how did this story come into your radar?
So I've been wanting to do a story on regenerative agriculture, and I had been speaking with some of the people in this who eventually ended up in the story. I was thinking of going up to this other soil health tour later in July, and then I heard about this video, and I was like, oh, this would be good to let people know about what's this video that's been out there. I didn't realize that it had so many views. So I thought people would be interested in seeing the story, but also seeing the video about the work they're doing.
So myself, as someone who, before coming to the North Dakota News Cooperative, I covered agriculture for 13 some years. And I know that it can sometimes be difficult to get farmers to open up a little bit about their farming practices and about changes in farming and that kind of thing. Did you run into any of that? Was it difficult to get some of these sources and resources to talk about their farming practices?
Not too difficult. One of the issues was trying to get both of them because they're so busy right now. So I was able to get Tyler and speak with him, and he was quite open about his practices. With them having done this documentary, and they're quite open in that documentary. And both of them, I mean, if you go on Twitter and some other social media, they both do tweet about what they're working on. So for this case, it wasn't too difficult to getting them to open up.
There is a line in the story or a paragraph in the story that I found to be just so accurate that farmers who have been farming for the last 50 years or so probably won't change their practices now after they've been doing it for half a century. However, their sons and daughters who are coming in to take over the farms may be changing their practices. So as the farm succession continues, that's where the change is happening when we come in and have the younger generations coming in and taking over the farms. And I found that really interesting. That was, again, my experience as a farm reporter for so long. That was what I noticed as well. And so to see it again here, continuing with these regenerative practices, that it's the newer generations coming in, making those changes, I found to be really interesting.
Yeah, Kasim Khan at North Dakota State University's Carrington Research Extension Center. I was speaking with him about this. There is interest by some of those people who've been around for a long time, and they're often very more progressive than you think. It's just that it's late for them to do a big change. And even if that's not a big technical change, they might not have to get a bunch of new equipment, this sort of thing. Just the whole process can be cumbersome to work through if your loans are tied to other things. It might be easier for a younger person once they're starting out to say, hey, I want to make these changes as I go ahead. So that's something that will be interesting to watch over the next few years, whether some of these younger farmers do make this switch over and see this consumer drive of this change.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, some of these changes can be very expensive. They're time consuming. They take a lot of, some of them just are not easy changes to make. And so it makes sense that they're made when new people come in to run the farm. So again, a really interesting story. And that, again, headline is Mini-Doc Popularity Mirrors Growing Interest in Regenerative Agriculture. You can read that story on our website at newscoopnd.org or in one of our local newspaper partners. For the North Dakota News Cooperative, I'm Sabrina Halvorson. This has been The Backstory.